Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm going to close out of some of my stuff to make sure everything works here so that you don't get what has been happening in the past. Welcome to my channel. I had debated on whether or not we were going to do a upload on this or whether or not I was just going to do like a video or a live stream where we could interact and kind of talk about it. There was a lot here that we needed to unpack, and I was like, well, let's just maybe do a live stream and then people can join and come in as they have information. And I'm going to be doing this via StreamYard. So if you are if you notice that there's lags or anything, I can't control any lagging or anything. I had been having some StreamYard issues, but just so you know, we should hopefully not have any issues with the stream health. Okay. Anyways, I am going to, I don't see any of my moderators here, so I am going to have to turn on my members only right now. I do not see any of my moderators. I don't know if I can actually manage this. Okay. All right. I am not going to add any new mods because anyways, I'm not going to add any mods, or I don't know where my mods are. Anyways. Okay, so let's just jump into this. I don't need to, it's okay. It's okay. All right, let's just jump into this. I don't want to spend too much time dinking around here. Okay, so there's been some developments here, and I wanted to go through them. We know that JJ and Tylee Ryan, or JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, were found, and it's been sort of this whirlwind because, you know, I started covering this story. Now, some of you will be like, well, this doesn't really fit with your channel, but if you follow my channel, you'll know that I cover a lot of stuff related to like fundamentalists or, you know, cults. It's a keen interest that we have on this channel and something that I've been covering it. Yes, I know it's off. I thought I had it on. Okay. I'm just going to ask that while you're in chat, please make sure not to use words like the starts with an M related to what they would have done. Don't use the D word. Please, please, please be mindful of the language that you use. I want to keep everything healthy with the chat so that we can stay monetized. And I'm going to be very, very careful in how I use my language here. Okay. So I still don't have any moderators here, but let's just jump into this. Okay. So we know that JJ and Tylee were found, and there's been some questions about like how were they found, what was found, like where were they found, what was it that brought them to this place, like how did they get there, and why, like how did this all happen and who was involved? Because we're still sitting here all these days later and there's not been an arrest yet. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow have not been charged yet in this. So it has a lot of people wondering, like, well, why? Why haven't they been charged? What's going on? Why hasn't this happened? And so it sounds like they're methodically going through information, and they released the probable cause affidavit the other day. Last night, actually, East Idaho News posted it, and the probable cause affidavit has a lot of information here that I was actually pretty stunned about. I was like, whoa, this is so much information. I can't believe this. Like, I can't believe how much they actually, like, how much information was actually in here. So let's go through this and kind of walk through whatever's in here. And I'm going to pop it out. Actually, so East Idaho News released it. Nate Eaton at East Idaho News receives it from the prosecutor. The prosecutor actually had it. It was previously a sealed document, and they unsealed it yesterday, and it was released on East Idaho News. Now, I had the whole East Idaho News website picked up, but I found it actually on Reddit without any watermarks so that it's just easier to read, to share with you. So I'm going to just pop this out. So this actually was shared on the Reddit thread, and we're going to talk through a few things here. So on the probable cause affidavit, I thought some of the interesting aspects of it here were that they actually had, it says on November 16th, Rexburg Police Department were involved in the search for J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and their mother, Lori Vallow, has been charged with 2 felonies. The minor children's mother, Lori, has been, like, with the desertion of a minor, 1 misdemeanor count of resisting and obstructing, and then solicitation to commit a crime, and then a contempt charge. So she's been sitting in prison since, like, I think, I don't know, February, and it says that they found them in Hawaii. It goes into some of the details about, you know, like how they get to this point. So they find him in Hawaii on November 20th or February 20th. She's arrested. Chad was not charged at that point. But they said that they've been doing this joint investigation with the FBI since November 26th. And they say the last verifiable sighting of Tylee was on September 8th, 2019 in her mother's apartment. And then the last verifiable was JJ was seen on September 22nd, 2019 at her mother's apartment. And Melanie Gibb, her friend, who was also part of this sort of weird belief system that they were all a part of, was there and verified that with police. Now, the interesting thing that I thought about this was that Melanie Gibb actually, who had been interviewed and who had been a part of a lot of these different datelines and different sites that have been sharing some of the details about them. I thought this was an interesting take because it's clear now that Melanie has, you know, she's working with the FBI, providing them information. But the criticalness of this is that she spent so much time knowing all of this information and she did not speak to them for months and months and months and months and months. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But this is the part that's odd. It says, so Lori Vallow moves to Rexburg on September 1st, 2019 with her children, JJ and Tylee, Alex, and her brother, Alex Cox. They reside in these townhomes, and he resides in the same complex, and he kind of lives a little bit further down. And they say that Melanie Gibbs cooperated with Idaho and Arizona law enforcement regarding the investigation of the children, and she reported that on September 19th, 2019, through the morning of September 23rd, she visited Lori Vallow at her new residence in Rexburg, and she reported that she arrived in Rexburg. Lori informed her that JJ had become a zombie. A zombie. She further reports that the term zombie refers to an individual whose mortal spirit has left their body, and their body is now the host of another spirit. And the new spirit in a zombie is always considered a dark spirit. And while the dark spirit inhabits the host body, the person's true spirit goes into limbo and stuck there until the host body is physically killed. As such, death of the physical body then brings the original spirit and they can be released from limbo. And the belief was told to Gibb by Lori Vallow. She learned it from Chad Daybell and immediately told Melanie, and she was like present, and she immediately was present with Lori when Chad first taught her this and the information over the phone in early 2019 in reference to Charles Vallow. So here's the interesting thing here is that Melanie tells them that, listen, Lori has decided that the kids are zombies, but this zombie theory doesn't start with Lori. It's Chad made this decision, right? Chad decides this. Chad's the one that tells Lori. In fact, he tells her that Charles, her husband, is also one. And so he's convincing Lori that she's surrounded by people that have negative energy, and that the only way that they can get rid of them is by getting rid of them, figuratively and literally. And that way you can free them from that energy. Seriously, you cannot make this up. Now, I'm going to jump over to another document, because this is actually Melanie. She wrote this letter, and it was released by East Idaho News. So we're just going to open this up. So on their website, she actually talks about how Lori and them meet. And so she says, I met Lori, and we seemed to have similar spiritual experiences. She was full of light and radiated great love of the Lord, as I thought anyway. She shared as she would believe in her own way some sacred experiences we had. I believed her, and she was just as enthusiastic as I was. She told me I was part of the 144,000, which is all these people that are going to get into heaven, right? And as she was, it was part of her commission to help others become part of it as well. There were some deceptions I had which I did not understand at the time that were from Satan. And then she says Chad and Lori met, and Chad seemed to have all the answers she was desiring. She had learned about multiple probations from the internet and really believed she was married to Morani. She heard him often talk to her, according to Lori. Chad informs her that she had been married to him before, and then he also informs her that they had been married multiple times, and that when he was James, and that one of those times was when he was James from the Bible. And he tells Lori that like they're each other's favorites and they need to be together because he is the leader of the 144,000. So Moroni. Okay, I'm sorry. My questions here is that he designs this scheme, right? This belief system that is so far outside of it. And he meets Lori, and he has like his eye on the prize. And he's like, okay, this is who I'm going for. And I'm going to tell her that we were married. But from Melanie's own admission, it almost sounds as though Lori has gone into this place where she's having some sort of delusions. Because I've known a lot of people that are faithful and have, a lot of faith and belief, but I've never literally heard people that are not dealing with some sort of mental illness say these types of things, like they believe they're married to these people and that they're, part of the 144,000. It all sounds like someone who is not well. And so it seems as though she's seeking out people to, teach her this belief. And then she has Chad sort of preying on that. Yeah, it's almost like she had a psychotic break. Exactly, Chris. And she has Chad preying on that. And then he's telling her, well, you're part of this, and I need you to actually, help me lead this. So Melanie then continues, and she says she fell madly infatuated with him. Lori loved his spiritual gifts, as he claimed to have the veil opened a little all the time and asked the Lord to close it because he saw too much. They felt it was okay to have this infatuated love because Jesus knew it was their mission to be the head of the 144,000, and they had been married multiple times, and this was obviously not true. So she falls madly in love with him after he convinces her that they've been married in the past, and they are literally commissioned by Jesus to lead and find the 144,000. So everyone that knew Lori before she got involved with this said that this was like not how she was. So I wonder, at some point, did something happen with her mental health that sort of changed her? Now, Chad, for him to have these sort of beliefs, come on, cult leaders can come up with anything to get people to believe, and they will manipulate and find any weakness in people to get them to believe things, and they will put together any narrative that fits their agenda, right? So for Chad to have these things, I don't necessarily think, oh, this guy is literally mentally ill. I think like he's just coming up with his own belief system to try to get people to believe him and follow him, and whatever he says is just what he's saying, but he's selectively like picking people out. And so he decides that Lori is going to be his leader, and so Lori then falls in love with him, and she's like his puppet, basically telling everyone that, you know, this is kind of this is our destiny, this is what we have to do, this is where we're going to go. It's all very odd to me. So, anyways, yeah, someone said wackadoos to the max. So she continues and says Charles was supposed to die according to the visions Lori had of him dying. She was greatly disappointed when he didn't. Chad and Lori were so anxious to be together that Chad devised a plan and called Lori to let her know that Charles was taken over by an unclean spirit and was no longer Charles anymore. These unclean spirits would later be called zombies. I was there when this happened, and Lori seemed a little overwhelmed by this idea, but wanted to believe Chad. So not only does Chad convince her that you are my wife because Jesus told me these things, but now, I'm not saying Lori is innocent, but now he has convinced her somehow that Charles is also a zombie and he needs to be disposed of. And Melanie is basically telling all of this to the FBI, and she released this article, this letter on this, this organization called Vallow, which is where they talk about these weird beliefs that they have. So, basically, long story short here is they decide that they're going to, she describes it sort of as, he's the master and she's sort of the puppet on his hand doing his work. That's sort of how Melanie describes it. Now, let's jump back to the affidavit, because I thought that part was so Melanie knew all of this. She knew all of this, and she sat on this information for months and months and months and months while everyone was looking for these kids, and she knew all of this. This is the part that really frustrates me, because I feel like she's putting all this information out now, and she's like, well, I needed time to put this out and think about this. But at the same time, it's like she knew all of this and had all these, she was around when all of this was going on, and yet she didn't stop them or do anything to prevent them from doing things to the children, because she knew what zombie meant. She knew what the end goal meant with zombie, and yet didn't protect or take steps to protect the kids, and seemed almost complacent when decisions were made or the kids just disappear. So I initially thought, well, Melanie's kind of being the hero because she's pointing them to the kids. But no, Melanie actually didn't do enough, I don't think, for these kids. And I don't know if it's that she's scared, that she thought she could be turned into a zombie. I don't know if that's what it is. There's so many reasons why people don't talk or don't cooperate. I don't know. But I was like, that's sort of odd. So I want to back up to this probable cause affidavit again. And so they say, Melanie Gibb further informs me that Lori Vallow calls Tylee a zombie in the spring of 2019. Gibb was on the phone with Lori and heard Lori call Tylee a zombie, to which Tylee responded, "Not me, Mom." This arose out of Lori wanting Tylee to babysit JJ, and Tylee did not want to. Lori Vallow also told Gibb that Tylee had turned into a zombie when she was 12 or 13, which was approximately the same time Tylee was difficult to deal with. So if she knows what the end goal is with the zombies, I'm like, why is it that Melanie sat on this information for such a long time while they're searching? Melanie had to have known based on her own letter where she says that the only way that they can treat and get the zombie away out of the host is by letting that host effectively disappear from this world. Anyways, okay. So now we're going to go to this next part. I want to just pop this back up here. And it says that, now this is the interesting part. This gets on to like how they figure all of this out. So they figure this all out because they decide that they need to ping, and they're going to look at the cell phone data for Alex to see if they can correlate that to the location of where the kids were. And so it says at 4:37 in the morning, they say that Alex is in his own apartment. Oh, wait, let me jump back here. It says, okay, on Monday, September 9th. Oh, wait. This is all out of order. I'm sorry. Okay, it says on January 26, 2020, the search warrant is executed on their property. Through the investigation, they discovered that JJ had been registered at a school. He wasn't seen there. They say that the last known time someone sees him is September 23rd. Then on the 24th, she calls Vicki Barton at the school and informs her that JJ has gone to Louisiana to see his grandparents. On October 29th, the school district is informed that JJ would be homeschooled. And during the searches of her apartment in Rexburg, the searches of her apartment in Kauai, there's absolutely no evidence of homeschooling material found, and no school district has any idea or has any record of JJ. So the last verifiable sighting of Tylee is in Yellowstone. Remember, that was a big thing. Like they were thinking about searching Yellowstone at one point, and they say that's on September 8th. And there's photographs that establish that. Those were going around online. But they say that Alex, he drives a silver Ford F-150, and he start tracking his GPS from the his cell phone connections. And so they say that the analysis survey team, which is part of the FBI, used a system called CAST, and it analyzed all of his data and like from the phone and the location information. And so the analysis provided the location of his phone. And they say that based on the fact that most people have their phones at all times on them, it's safe to say that if Alex's phone is somewhere, then it's Alex that is there with the phone. So they say that he is like at the west entrance of Yellowstone at like 1840 would be 6 o'clock at night. His phone appears like at a restaurant about 5 minutes later until about 7. He says that they're back in Rexburg by about 8 o'clock. And the phone is then at her apartment, at Lori's apartment, at about 9 o'clock. And then it says that Cox appears to go to the Maverick on Main Street in Rexburg at about 9:43 until 9:53. And he's back at Lori's apartment at 10:44 to 11:15. And that at 11:44, he's located at his residence, which is apartment 107. But then it says the next day, on September 9th at midnight until 12:44, he's located at his apartment. But then at 2:42 in the morning until 3:37, he's at Lori's apartment. So he's in the middle of the night at Lori's apartment for some reason. And obviously that's where Lori lives with JJ and Tylee. And they said this is significant not only because he is there in the middle of the night, but it's because the only time in September he appears to go over there in the middle of the night. And then it says at 4:37, he goes back to his own apartment, and then he's there until 8:59 in the morning. And at 9:21, he's located at his property. He's located at a property with the address of 202 1900 East Rexburg, which is Chad Daybell's house. So he goes to Lori's house in the middle of the night. And then after all of it's said and done, he is at Chad Daybell's property where he's apparently doing something back by the barn. Why is he at Lori's house in the middle of the night and then going to Chad's property? And it says that he's still at the property. So they get a reading there at 9:21. They also get one at 10:39. At 10:47, it shows like he's in some other place, but they said it could have still been at the home. It was just not pinging correctly, and he's still there. So it first pings there at 9:21 in the morning, and it appears as though he leaves there by 11:52. So he's there for like 2 hours. Because then he's found at the Del Taco. And then he goes home to his apartment. But while he's there, it appears as though he's back behind a barn. Okay? So they say through the investigation, they seize and search and analyze the cellular devices. And on June 1st, 2020, I was informed that they had been examining a phone believed to be owned by Tamara Daybell, and this is where they find text messages from Chad between him and Tammy before she actually passes away. And so Tammy and her husband are texting on September 9th, 2019, and this is the day that this is when Alex was at the property, and he's literally text messaging her, and he's like having a fire at his property. And he's telling her that he is going to bury a raccoon that he had found, which they thought was weird because raccoons are nocturnal. They're not usually out during the day. And his neighbors say, well, yeah, he did shoot a raccoon, but it was way back in like the summer. It wasn't on this day. But he's out there like texting Tammy saying, well, yeah, we're having a fire. I'm getting rid of these tree branches. But he calls it limbs, which is eerie now if you think about it. And so when they go to the property they have a pet cemetery there. So they basically say that like Tammy and him are big animal lovers. They have this place on their property where they bury all of the animals. And it's on that spot where they talk to someone who knows them, who points them to this spot, and it happens to be where they actually find Tylee. So he's texting Tammy about having a fire the same time that Alex is bringing something there, and then they find her charred remains in that spot. It's like, this is so sick and twisted. And like, even if it's Alex who's the one that does everything for them and he's sort of like their hitman in a way, it's clear to me by looking through all of this that it's Chad and Lori that are the ones that are directing him. And then Alex ends up gone. He ends up dead, from a clot in his lung. But his autopsy is still pending. So it's a suspicious death, but they still haven't really ruled, like, it's crazy. So, yeah. No, it doesn't say anything about neighbors smelling anything at all. So he says to her, well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt some bum, all of the limb debris on the fire pit. I got them soaked, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, they say I found that suspicious because they're nocturnal animals, so I told you all about that. And then they say that, they talked to somebody, a sister, Tammy's Daybell's sister, who tells them that, yes, they have a cemetery on their property, and she shows them on an aerial map, like, where it's located. And she informed me that she's aware of this location because Tammy had shown it to her in the past, and she shows them on the photograph, like, where it is, and that's exactly the same spot where Alex's phone had pinged on September 9th. So we've all been so frustrated about why is this been so hard, but it's like they've been hiding all of this information. But it's amazing that we're at a point where we can actually ping the exact location a phone is, and it happens to be in the same spot where they claim that they bury animals. And then Chad is telling his wife, I have to go bury the raccoon, probably as a cover so that she's not wondering, like, why is there new mounds of dirt on this ground, right? And then they say that, they interview Melanie on the 3rd. So they establish that Alex is there on the 9th. Chad's sending stuff about Tammy, about the debris. And then they say that Melanie Gibb and her boyfriend, they talked to them on June 3rd. And they discussed the weekend with them related to Tylee they don't see Tylee at all. And they talk about JJ, and they say that when she's there, they tell her that JJ is now a zombie, and it was because he was sitting and watching TV. And she said that that's just how JJ acted. But then they verify that on the night of September 22nd, that they see Vallow and Warwick were going to do a podcast, and she says that JJ's acting up. So Alex takes JJ with him to his apartment. And it's later that night they see Alex holding JJ, and they say they remember it because it was this tender moment. But it was after that, when they woke up, they asked him where JJ was, and she informed him that JJ had been acting like a zombie and had been crawling on the kitchen cabinetry and had gotten on top of the cabinetry in the space between the cabinetry and the ceiling. And she informed Warwick and Gibb that when JJ had climbed upon the cabinetry, that he knocked down a picture of Jesus off the refrigerator. And she then informed him that Alex had come and taken JJ. And so then they do the same thing to Alex's phone for that, and they actually ping him on that morning at Chad Daybell's property near the pond on the property on the northern edge. And so they get all of these pings, and that's how they end up getting the search warrant, and they find him exactly where the phone was pinged. And my question here is that it took Melanie Gibb until June 3rd to tell them any of this. She had known since she had been in there in September that JJ was not seen again, and that Lori told her he had turned into a zombie and Alex took him. And she did not question this. And then the missing persons case is started in November, and she never brings this forward to the police, as his grandparents and his brother is desperately looking are looking for JJ and Tylee, and Melanie is just sitting there not doing anything. And Melanie's excuse is interesting because she says that in her letter, it wasn't, it took her a while to decide what to do. How does it take you a long time to decide what it is that you need to do? If you know that the kids are missing and you have all of this information and you are, trying to understand what you're doing, this whole letter that she wrote, which is 7 pages, she says, I was fearful one day after all this happened to me, and I couldn't sleep well. I couldn't eat much. I cried a lot, and I told the Lord, I can't feel you because I have so much fear. I don't even know how to give this to you. He gently reminded me to help. I let the Savior help me before. And so now she's deciding she's going to be the Savior, I guess. And she's talking about having conversations with God. And, she started saying that, he taught me once again when the media started. So she's talking about God. So clearly Melanie has this bizarre belief system as well, where she thinks she can have a direct relationship and talks to him. And she says, the fear began to kick into gear again. I didn't want them to see me. I was embarrassed. That was everyone going to think of me. I didn't want to have other people tell my story before I had a chance. When others did it, it brought me great fear. I am not mad at anyone. Please know that I am now grateful that someone did, because I had to overcome my fear, that it brought me closer to God like you had no idea. The fear was so great I can't begin to describe, so I turned to faith, to the Bible. So apparently the person that she's talking about there that called her out was Annie Cushing, Tylee's aunt of her father. Like, so it's her father who passed away, his sister, calls her out and says, like, you know things, and why haven't you said things? And so she's pushed to say things, but she's pretending under the guise of religion or something that she was scared and didn't know what to do. And like, just her whole letter is just crazy to me. Like, have you ever pondered what are the doctrines for the devil? That they tell the future, always trying to get you to know about things that you shouldn't be asking about others' lives. There's a reason God put a veil between him and us to teach us faith. Like, let me just say here, this energy work and the doctrines of the devils will continue to take people away from God's church. Like, so she talks about how, like, at one point, Chad starts taking a pendulum and like putting it up on people and saying, like, if the pendulum swings one way, you have bad energy, and if the pendulum swings the other way, you have good energy. And that's how he decided who were zombies. So, and he walks around with this in his pocket. And I'm sitting here going, like, did you not say anything all these months because you were afraid that your fate would end up like JJ and Tylee and all of these people? Did you just not want to say anything? It's hard for me to understand, like, why it took her such a long time to actually speak out for these kids and tell people, like, what happened. She sat on this information for, like, what, 10 months? 10 months. Even before that, she knew that Charles was a target, and then Charles ends up dead. She knew that the kids were targets, and they end up dead. She knew that, like, Brandon had been deemed to have bad energy. Her Lori's niece's ex-husband. All the people that end up deceased around them are because Chad deems them as bad energy. But the real thing is that Chad had this plan the whole time, in my opinion, and so did Lori, that they needed to find a way to get everyone around them gone because they wanted to be together. I don't understand this at all. At all. Like, I don't know how this is even going to be tried. I don't even know, like, this is going to be literally the most bizarre story in the world, because like, in the one breath it's like, okay, you finally spoke, but in the next breath you waited 10 months and you like let these families have their hearts broken. So then Annie Cushing, I noticed this on IMGR. I was doing some digging. She publishes this, which is a letter to Melanie, basically like calling her out point by point about her letter. And, you know, she's like, so reading a 7-page letter of all the lessons you're learning from this crisis is the emotional equivalent of having salt thrown in an open wound. I'm angry that I don't want to be so cruel. I'm fighting with everything I have not to hate with the fire of 1,000 suns everyone who took a step back and turned the other way, while Lori, Chad, and Alex had their way with anyone who got in the way of their self-entitled mission. I was still raw from you choosing as your foray into the spotlight an admission that JJ and Tylee were among the dead without ever offering an explanation as to how you knew that. You knew family members were twisting in the wind, distraught over not knowing where the kids were, yet you let us know that you didn't come forward until the end of May because you weren't ready. Did it ever even occur to you at least to reach out to let family members know that you would be dropping that bombshell? I waited 3 days for anything to figure out why you would have had said that. I thought there was a chance that those words were going to be my only shot and answers of closure to my anguish. Do you realize that there's still unanswered questions for those of us who loved those kids? I'm sure those from both sets of families were wondering which child was the one who's contaminated, whose body was so, in such bad shape. We now know it was Tylee's body. And she points out things like areas where she was just completely tone deaf, where, she's preaching in her letter. And she said, I didn't want, and she addresses the fact that she calls her out, and she said, she points to the part in the letter where she says, I didn't want to have other people tell my story. And so Annie says, I'm just going to go ahead and operate under the assumption that I'm the one who told the story before you had a chance. You waited 5 months to come forward. You certainly had many chances to before then. You said you weren't ready. Whether you're mad or not is of no consequence to me. I added details to my timeline as they emerged to help people try to wrap their minds around the deeply disturbing story. However, pointing out your lack of anger comes across to me like you're scrambling for some kind of higher moral ground. This assumption seems to be that you are somehow turning the other cheek, that people would have expected you to be angry, but you surprised us all with your zen and patience. So she's angry that she sat around and didn't do anything. And then she goes through this timeline. Were you the one that helped Lori steal Charles's car? Did you know that Lori had removed $35,000 from his business account? Did you know that Lori canceled his flight? Did you help her get rid of his clothes? What was the point of stealing even his underwear? Why did you accuse Charles of luring you to his house using Lori's phone? But then when Tylee asked if you had the text messages, you said, I don't have it all on my phone. He had supposedly just texted you hours before and issued a mea culpa confessing to deceiving you, and you weren't willing to offer up proof. Did you watch the body cam video of him trying to kick in a deadbolt door because he couldn't get in to his house and no one would answer his texts or calls? When you and Lori interviewed at the Gilbert Police Department, you already had the two officers eating out of your hand. Why did you both snicker and tell them that Charles didn't have any buddies? They're talking about their interview when Charles was trying to get Lori help. Then you took Lori's purse from her unlocked car. Then he took her purse from the unlocked car, and I believe this was to have officers waiting at the meeting point to take her to the community bridges. Did you know an officer asked for Charles' license when he called in the welfare check? Why did you help perpetuate the lie that Charles had a locksmith at the house to change the locks and keep Lori out of the home? Why did you take Tylee to the interview room? Did you notice that she had her arms crossed to soothe herself? You say in your letter, as Charles was supposed to die according to the visions of him dying, how is this not a huge red flag? You're talking to someone who was complaining that her spouse was supposed to die but wasn't. Why won't you or anyone else tell us truthfully when Lori and Chad met and who introduced them? Did you introduce them or did Jason Mao? Why did you agree to run recognizance for Melanie Pulowski? When did you talk to her neighbor and report back to her? Why did you agree, or in your effort to get out the right path again, have you disavowed Jason? And she has a lot of questions here. Why didn't you, when you went and visited her and said that Tylee was at BYU, why didn't you ask her? But Tylee was 16 years old. You're at the dorms. Why don't you go check on her? Why don't you ask to go visit her? Lori told you that that he had turned into a zombie the day before you arrived. So he is last seen on September 23rd, the day you left Rexburg, and you said you were with Chad and Lori. Lori had called Chad and called her and told her Charles had been overtaken by an evil spirit named Nick Schneider and had turned into a zombie. And there's actually dash cam or body cam footage of him telling Like, literally telling them this stuff. It's crazy to me. Like, you said that Lori told you she met Kay at the airport and handed JJ over to shortly after you left Rexburg. Was that the last time you spoke of JJ? Like, it sounds to me the way that Annie is putting this all together as though she feels like, if you look through this, that she feels like Melanie was involved in this. Like Melanie was an active participant in this. She had all these warning signs of what was going on. She knew what all of these things meant. She's taking steps to help Lori do the things that she needs to do to take these steps to do everything. But now Melanie wants to come out as the savior because she worked with the FBI and gave them the information. So part of me is wondering, is she finally cooperating? And I mean that in the sense of cooperating as though maybe she was under suspicion to a degree. Was she cooperating to avoid charges? Like, is this a situation where she's getting immunity? You know, she wants to make this seem as though she's doing this of her own free will. But it's so odd to me. Like, you know, she's there right with Melanie. She's right along with her the whole step of the way. It's so incredibly. She's just as guilty, says Jazz. Let's see. I want to see something. Deb said she was led to believe this, all of this, and needed help before she even came forward. Don't let them even use the excuse that either one of them were brainwashed. Yeah. I don't care what she was led to believe. There's no reason to do that to children, no reason to commit such horrible crimes. Exactly. She was led to believe and then didn't take the responsibility and waited that long to come out. It makes me sick. There's no way that anyone close to Lori didn't know what was going on. Melanie, as well as Lori's niece, had to know something. So, and they're all complacent and they're allowing this to happen. They know what zombies mean. They know that everyone around them is dying. They know that Chad has put all of these zombie like statuses onto these people and none of them are doing anything. No one's reporting this to police. And the sad part is there's like this body cam footage that the East Idaho News put out of Charles Vallow. And he's literally telling police, and it's eerie to watch it now because he's telling police back before all of this goes down, back before the whole thing happens, that Lori is threatening to end his life. And the police are just like, there's nothing we can do. I mean, she has her side to it too. So maybe, you know, maybe we don't know if you're telling the truth, you know? And he's sitting there like pleading with them, saying like, I have a special needs son. I am worried about his safety. I am worried about my child. And it's so eerie to see this because it's like he was pleading for help and he got none. And this is the part that is so diabolical to me because Melanie and Lori sit in a interrogation with police and she acts completely normal. So how is it that she can turn these feelings on and off? How can she act so normal, but then when it suits her, she believes these things, but when she's talking to the police, it's like nothing happened? My guess is Melanie gets immunity in exchange for the info given. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a deal here. It's crazy to me. Wasn't Melanie on Dateline saying she didn't know anything? Yeah, when Melanie was on Dateline, she wasn't talking like this at all. She was acting like she knew next to nothing. It's so sad. Because psychopaths can turn on emotion. It's not real. I have a hard time believing that anyone in their right mind would just be a puppet to someone like Chad. Like, you would have to, in your whole heart, want to believe and want to do these things too. There's no way you just ultimately believe this, and then when you're around mental health professionals who are questioning about this, you're denying this stuff. That tells me you have enough wherewithal to know that what you believe is out of this world and ridiculous, so that when authorities want to talk to you about it, you know well enough that you need to deny it. But then you're using it as justification to carry out these things. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around this. And the more details that come out, like, this affidavit is just so damning. And it's like, and they say that, like, while they're at the property, Chad is literally watching them. And Chad is like, as soon as they uncover it, he takes off. Like, he was watching them to figure out if they were going to find it. They find it, and then he gets out in his car. And yeah, Melanie was there when it all happened. It's so hard to know where their mind is. So that's all I have for this. I would love to know what your thoughts are. This case is so twisted and so crazy. And it's like, you know, when it all started, like, going along, we kept wondering, like, why is everyone, like, ending up gone, right? Well, now we know Mr. Pendulum decided that he needed to get rid of everyone, including his wife and Charles and all the kids, so that he could have his princess and they could be the leaders of their cult. These two better be charged. Like, I am waiting so hard for this. Like, there is no way, like, I know that Alex might have done the dirty work, but it's so clear who the masterminds are here, that even if they don't have anything on their hands or dirt on their fingers related to this, they are still the ones that orchestrated it all. It's like Charles Manson didn't do anything physically, but he was the mastermind. She says charge Melanie too. She can't get off with all that she knew. Yeah. I would beg for help. I wouldn't sit back and watch kids die to save my own life. Yeah, me either. I wouldn't be complicit in this and be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to help you move things and steal money, and I know that what's going to happen when I do these things for Charles. Melanie knew what was going to happen to Charles, and she let it happen. That's so disgusting to me. All right, so let me just double check here to see if, like, I've got super chats here. Thank you, C. Spurgey, for becoming a member. Meredith Hurd, thank you for becoming a member. Ronnie, thank you for your super chat. Brenda, thank you for your super chat. Kimberly Branson, Gabriel Hunter, thank you for becoming members. AR says, thank you, Katie, for always speaking up. Much love to you and your loved ones, too. And Ronnie says, thank you, Katie. And Ronnie also said, the WOCBQ community is amazing. It is possible that she was scared, but it still isn't an excuse. I don't buy it. All right, you guys. So I might be back later. If you didn't see this before, please check out. My husband has a new single came out. His new album was dropped yesterday. It's available on Bandcamp, which I linked. A lot of you were asking about his music. I posted his video, which is not typical, but I figured, you know, I have this platform. Some of you have wondered about his music. If you want to check out his music, I actually posted his video with his song Father, which is neo-folk, and it's like it's about our son. Check that out. You can also check out his Bandcamp and his Spotify, where you can see and like listen to more of his music if you're into that kind of metal. Otherwise, make sure, if you haven't yet, New Sub Love is the promo for 10% off all merchandise in our store, in the Teespring store through the end of June for all new subscribers. I'll probably be back later with more, but for now, that's all I've got. So tell me what your thoughts are. Is Melanie a part of this? Did Melanie get a sweetheart deal? Should she have spoken out sooner? And is it amazing how these phones were able to track these kids? Like, I am so grateful for technology right now. All right, you guys, I'll be back. Bye.